Welcome to this explainer on the absolutely fascinating dynamics of willpower. Today, we're unpacking a highly influential piece of Columbia University research that, frankly, completely changes how we look at the delay of gratification. If you've ever found yourself wondering why some folks seem to possess an iron will while the rest of us just kind of cave at the slightest temptation, well, you are in the exact right place. We're going to look under the hood and deconstruct the actual cognitive architecture behind self-control. And spoiler alert, it means throwing out that old idea of willpower just being some kind of raw mental strength.
Okay, let's dive into a universally relatable struggle. We've all been there, right? Whether you're trying to stick to a new diet, fighting the urge to doom scroll on your phone when you really need to work, or trying to save money instead of hitting buy now on something you don't need. We make these firm, highly logical commitments to ourselves. And yet, in the heat of the moment, just one glance at a piece of chocolate cake, or let's be real, even just the smell of a bakery when you're walking by, can completely torpedo our best intentions. So why exactly does our logical human reasoning lose the battle to immediate pleasure so often?
Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the willpower dilemma, then meet the hot and cool systems. From there, we'll cover actual strategies for self-control, dig into the irony of suppressing our thoughts, and finally, look at how stress essentially hijacks our willpower.
All right, let's jump right into part one, the willpower dilemma.
Let's start with a classic test for impulse control. You might actually be familiar with this one, the famous preschooler marshmallow test. Now, while this might sound like just a cute game to play with kids, it's actually a profound prototype for how we study willpower and long-term goal pursuit. The setup is a grueling delay of gratification paradigm. The kids are given a tough choice. Ring a bell to get a small immediate reward, like a single marshmallow, or sit there and wait an agonizing 15 minutes for the researcher to return and get a bigger reward, like 2 marshmallows. The crazy part? The number of seconds a preschooler is willing to hold out actually predicts massive cognitive and social outcomes decades later, including things like higher SAT scores. So this simple little choice is testing a fundamental, lifelong skill. Moving right along to section 2, meet hot and cool. To figure out how we actually manage to wait for that second marshmallow, and more importantly, how we can apply this to our messy adult lives, we've got to look at the 2 warring systems inside our brains. See, it's not just one unified mind making a choice. It's an ongoing battle between 2 very different ways of processing the world. The researchers identified 2 distinct networks. On one side, you've got the hot system. This one is highly emotional, simple, and reflexive. Think of it as a go system. It develops really early in childhood, and it operates incredibly fast, based purely on raw temptation. On the flip side, we have the cool system. This is your cognitive, complex, and reflexive no system. It's slow, it develops way later in life, and it is the absolute control center for self-regulation. So your level of self-control on any given day, it's basically determined by the tug-of-war between these 2 networks. By default, when temptation is right in your face, the odds are stacked against you. When a hot stimulus, like that single marshmallow, is prominently displayed, it fires a direct signal to a hotspot in our neural network. This strong activation triggers an immediate, reflexive go reaction. You cave. The cool system doesn't even have the time to boot up and intervene. This is exactly why simply staring at the thing you want to resist is almost guaranteed to end in failure. You're playing right into the hot system's hands. Which brings us nicely to section 3. Strategies for self-control. So, the million-dollar question. How do we break out of this default reflex? How do we purposefully empower the cool system to achieve our goals instead of just surrendering to the hot system? Well, the researchers found that willpower isn't about gritting your teeth. It's entirely about the strategic deployment of your attention. They broke these methods down into external and internal strategies. External strategies mean physically changing your environment, like hiding the temptation or physically playing with something else. Internal strategies are the ones happening entirely inside your head, like actively shifting your attention, creating mental distractions, or using a really cool trick called cool ideation. Let's see just how powerful these can be in practice. It is honestly amazing how simple this first trick is. Just hide the temptation. By covering up the marshmallows or putting the cookies out of sight in a jar, the magnetic pull of that stimulus drops off a cliff. In the original studies, when the treats were sitting right out in the open, kids only lasted about 1 minute. But when the exact same rewards were just covered up, boom, 75% of the kids were able to wait the full 15 minutes. That is a massive jump. And the exact same thing happened when they just gave the kids a Slinky to play with. By literally diverting your attention away from the hot stimulus, you buy your cool system the critical time it needs to take the steering wheel.
And that builds right into the ultimate internal strategy, reconstructing the stimulus. This is so fascinating. Basically, if you take the object of your desire and cognitively reframe it, you strip it of all its power. For example, the researchers taught kids to imagine the marshmallow as just a flat picture with a frame around it, or to look at crunchy, salty pretzels and pretend they were just long, thin wooden logs. By activating the cool informational data of the object without its hot, yummy features, self-control skyrockets. You aren't ignoring reality, you are strategically changing how your brain represents it. But watch out, because there is a major trap here. Let's look at Section 4, the irony of suppressing thought. These attention strategies sound incredibly effective, and for sure they are. But trying to aggressively police our own minds can totally backfire. Trying too hard not to think about something is often the exact thing that causes us to fail. In psychology, this is called sabotage by counterpriming. It's the phenomenon where explicitly telling yourself not to think about an object makes that specific object basically neon lit in your brain. You know the classic test? If I tell you right now, do not think of a white bear, well, what's literally the only thing in your head right now? A white bear, right? Or think about a dieter who is constantly obsessing over their strict rules. By constantly repeating what they can't eat, they are actually keeping the concept of delicious food right at the absolute front of their mind. So when you explicitly mention a not-to-be-thought-of object, you are actually priming the hot nodes in your brain. The very instruction you give yourself draws cognitive energy straight toward the temptation, totally subverting your attempts to stay in control. It's wildly ironic. The hot node that triggers your impulsive go response gets activated by the exact rule you created to avoid it. The big takeaway here? You can't just command the hot system to shut up. You have to actively give the cool system something entirely different to chew on.
And there's one more major hurdle we have to talk about. Section 5, how stress hijacks willpower.
Even if you perfectly master all these internal and external strategies, there is an external saboteur that can completely hijack your entire cognitive architecture: stress. It's fascinating to see what happens under the hood here. When you're relaxed or under low stress, the cool system is engaged and ready to go. But as stress climbs to really high levels, that complex reflective cool system becomes entirely dysfunctional. It literally short circuits. At the same time, the impulsive hot system becomes hyper-responsive. So when you're heavily stressed, your brain literally shuts down long-term planning and defaults entirely to immediate reflexive survival responses.
The researchers summed it up perfectly. They noted that chronic stress has a selective negative impact on the cool system, and hence, chronic stress should be reflected in systematic and relatively stable decreases in impulse control. This is profoundly important to understand. It completely explains why chronic stress, exhaustion, or a tough environment make willpower nearly impossible. It translates these clean, laboratory findings directly to real-life behavioral struggles. When people under severe stress make poor choices, it is not a moral failing. It is a predictable biological shift in the brain, straight toward the hot system. So, let's pull all of this together into an actionable game plan. Navigating the battle for self-control means turning this cognitive psychology into real-life steps. First, recognize the pull of the hot system. Just know that staring down temptation is a losing game. Second, obscure or physically distance yourself from the stimulus. Out of sight, out of mind. Third, use cool ideation. Get creative and reframe the object to strip away its emotional power. And finally, and arguably most importantly, ruthlessly manage your stress levels, because that's the only way to protect your cool system's ability to function in the first place. I want to leave you with this final thought. True willpower isn't about enduring torture through raw mental strength. It's about being a clever architect of your own attention. The real power isn't in your resistance, it's in how intelligently you manage your mind's systems. So, the next time you face a major temptation, I want you to ask yourself, are you going to let the stimulus control you, or are you going to change the stimulus to stay cool? Thank you so much for exploring the science of self-control with me today. Keep learning and stay focused.